So some people get confused, and we have a video. I put together like a 12 or 13 minute video, something like that, with some nice illustrations, and it takes a very simple example, like $100, and it explains the mechanics of inflation, and it walks all the way through why this happens, and it talks about debt to GDP in a very simple way to understand. In the example in there, you'll see like people will think, oh, GDP is growing, and it's entertaining, I guess, for lack of better words, to listen to politicians talk about debt to GDP is growing. Okay, like real growth or just, nominal growth? Because wealth is not money. That's the biggest mistake we've been conditioned to believe. Wealth is not money. And, I believe there's a four-legged stool that really is wealth and life. That's...
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Financial Mastery Simplified. I am your host, Jacqueline or Jax Crider, and today we have Mr. Jay Johnson on with us. Jay has got a very interesting background, not traditionally financially speaking, a lot more on like the law enforcement SWAT kind of side, but got really interested in kind of all things money and did a lot of deep dive research, which is something I of course love and appreciate. And so he's kind of meandered over to our space. And so welcome, Jay. Tell the audience a little bit about who you are and what you do, and we'll kind of get rocking and rolling today.
Hey, I appreciate you having me on. It's always great to get together and talk to people, especially anything finance. I love talking anything finance, macro, money, history, America, any of that stuff. And my background's kind of broad. It's pretty broad brush to paint with, but basically, short story is, grew up in Wyoming, went in the military after high school, got in there, I got to England. That was my first duty assignment. 6 months later, 9/11 happened. Life got busy. Never sat anywhere more than probably a few months for the last few years. And it was just incredible experience, but it was busy. So I got out, came back to Wyoming, and started going to college on the GI Bill, and started a construction company. Didn't know anything about business. Absolutely nothing. And I was more focused on learning how to do the construction work than learning how to run a business. So that was quite a journey. But anyway, we started growing that and got into law enforcement. That was always kind of my second dream, I guess, after military, I guess, and went into law enforcement right at the tail end of about a 20-year career there. In that capacity, I've worked in a number of things. From everybody starts on patrol, been a general detective, been massively involved in training. So I really like personal development and training and learning. Really big in the SWAT and tactics background. So I was on a team since 2011, just got done here in December. And so in that, I've worked various capacities, one of which was a sniper. So that was another one of my dreams as a kid. It's funny. My dad always used to tell me, like, I don't think shooting guns is going to get you anywhere. I'm like, I don't know. I think I did pretty good with it. But I kept running the construction company. And eventually we did a number of things. We scaled it up, subcontract over the years. Then eventually we started building under our own flag. And we started buying or building and selling houses, custom homes. That led into drafting and design. And so we got a number of components to the company now. And then about 2018-ish, maybe, I started noticing deals were getting harder to do. Instead of spending time on putting a construction project together, I spent a lot of time with bankers and appraisers. I'm like, wow, this is bananas. We're doing the same thing on repeat over and over. Why is this getting so hard? So anyway, short story is, I ended up having an operation on one of my hands, had some downtime because I don't sit still well for long. But this just happened to just showed up. And a buddy called me and says, hey, you should read this book. I thought of you. So I did. It was Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And I read it and I just went down a rabbit hole. And I just started, the more I studied. You
definitely go down a rabbit hole with that book for sure.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And it led me to such a cool journey because I started going down the rabbit hole, studying a bunch of stuff that everybody thought I was just geeking out on. But truly, it immediately started informing me as to what we were struggling with in putting deals together in a construction company. Well, then that led to kind of the short story is, and I think this is important because it really, your audience is big on you're really big on personal development and growth and learning. So I think this is something that's worth sharing. That's not just, the finance piece. What I did is I started realizing, okay, I want to get around other people and they're not coming to my house. So I need to go wherever they are and I need to get in different rooms. So what I did is I started traveling a lot. And I started going to conferences and I found the Real Estate Guys radio show, and that was hosted by Robert Helms and Russ Gray. And, they've been 25 years, and made good friends with them. And then, of course, that introduced me to other people. And pretty soon I'm at these high-end investment conferences. Well, I find myself at one, and I'm down in Belize, and I'm having, and I think this is the important point. I'm having supper, and every night, Robert always makes sure at this conference, supper is a big deal. That's where you talk about
Yeah.
whatever you went over in the day. That's where you build relationships and really get to understand whatever the content was. So he makes supper a
For
very,
sure.
very big thing. So I'm sitting there, and at that time, I'd been to a number of these things, and I had told nobody that I was in law enforcement, because I told myself, I don't want to bring that life into here. I don't want to have political discussions. I don't want to talk about who hates the
Right.
police. I don't want to do any of that. I just want to I want to talk about what we're here to talk about. So I was avoiding it. Nobody knew. And I'd been to several of these events. Well, then here we are around the supper table. And I don't remember what I said, but I said something that's kind of like the industry lingo. I said something in a way that people in the cop business talk. And a guy named Wagner in Alaska from Florida, he says, "Hey, what'd you say?" And he kind of looked at me weird. And I thought, oh, no, I'm had. And I thought, here we go. Well, turns out, what a fascinating, coincidence. Wagner, he's a big developer in Florida. He has Build to Rent Florida and Build to Rent Texas. And I mean, a few years ago, he had probably $750 million in the pipeline. And Wagner goes, "Why would you not tell people that? Are you nuts?" He goes, "Why are you hiding from your history?" And he says, "I used to be a cop." He basically retired in his 30s, super wealthy, wanted to go into law enforcement. That was his boyhood dream, but he was an immigrant. And he realized he couldn't go in the FBI, so he went to local law enforcement. And so he did that for a couple of years. Shocker, he says, "Well, that makes you negative." Yeah, no kidding, huh? But
I was gonna say, nothing will make you hate people more than seeing them at their worst.
nobody ever calls you to say, "Hey, I'm having a good day. Just want to see if you want to grab some coffee." So anyway, Wagner tells me the story, and he really encouraged me to own the story. Well, then my wife shows up right at the end of the conference to kind of vacation for a few days, and meets Wagner, and he's telling her, I told him to own this story, and of course, the lesson is you should listen to your wife early and often. She was right. She kept saying, "You just need to own your story. Why are you hiding from this?" And I fought it. And she goes, "I've been telling this idiot this
So
for
many of us fight that story for like not wanting to tell all the pieces of it, for sure.
100%. 100%. So anyway, short story is he convinced me to own the story. Basically, I found a way. At the time, I was starting a capital raising company. That became Code 3 Assets. And I found a way to match, to interweave, I guess would be better stated, my past with the present and the future. And so we fully embraced the story, the military story, the patriotism, the law enforcement service, and it became everything that is kind of our brand language, if you will, because Code 3 Assets is the company piece, but we have kind of a mission-based piece behind it, and we call that the Code 3 American Mission,
Right.
Code 3 American Community. And that's really, it just all came together, and it's only because I was sitting at that table.
Yeah, no, I love that. And you and I were talking a little bit before the show, I think that therein lies some of the challenges, that so often people are so focused on trying to be something that somebody else tells them to be, right? Or what they think they should be, as opposed to seeking out true alignment and financial freedom in the way that resonates with them, as opposed to like, well, this is what I've been told, and this is, how it should go, right? Should in heavy quotes, like this is what that should look like. And the problem is that it does not lead to true financial freedom, because it does not matter, in my opinion, how many zeros you have in your bank account. It does not matter how much wealth you've actually acquired. And unfortunately, that is that gap between the wealthy and the non-wealthy is growing astronomically, right, day by day, due to the fact that people are not tapping into their power. They are not looking at what some of the things that resonate with them. And the truth is that, yes, you need the components of understanding the mechanics, right? Like you have to understand how money operates, how it works, how do you use it to, like, it's why I'm kind of the anti Dave Ramsey girl, because my thing is like, I don't think all debt is bad debt. I think that debt can be a good thing, but it has to be very strategic. And you have to understand how to use it. You have to understand how it fits into your overall financial portfolio of like how you want that to look. But I don't also think it's the devil. I also don't think you should laden yourself with so much debt that it keeps you from doing what you're looking to do either, right? So because you're trying to keep up with somebody else's idea of what life should look like or what financials should look like or whatever, right? And I think you and I are on the same page on that one, because it's just, there's so many different aspects of money that we've just been told, well, this is the only way. And it's not true.
And well, you brought up debt, so I gotta go down this hole a little bit. I like to ask people when they're. Let me back up. You mentioned Dave Ramsey, okay? And boy, if I put anything on social media or if I talk about this, I always worry about, am I going to get just samurai'd here? You know?
Oh, I get same right in the mom's group. Anytime I say anything negative about Dave Ramsey, it's like, he's the best thing ever. I'm like, look, I didn't say that he doesn't have some very good aspects to him. I mean, I listened to him to see just kind of what his perspective is, and he doesn't have horrible perspective, so I give him that. It doesn't mean that I agree with him on everything.
100%. You know, Dave strikes me, I really enjoyed his Entree Leadership book and things like that. He's got a lot of value to give the world. But really, if you think about his cohort, if you think about the cohort he's targeting people that are $200,000 or whatever, some number in credit card debt, student loan debt. They can't really do anything because they're saddled with consumer debt. Okay.
Right.
Well, he does wonders for those people. But when he starts advising on wealth, there's a couple things that I just say, okay, I'm really big on objectivity, right? Like when I was a detective, it's not I need to go prove this person did something. I just need to be a finder of fact, document it, and it comes out the way it comes out. So I just look at this and say, okay, well, Dave Ramsey, let's say, started in about the 90s. And I've done social media posts on this cautiously. But he starts about the 90s, says, hey, he always talks about being a millionaire. Okay, well, now that'd be like...
Stay tuned. We'll be back right after this message from our sponsors.
Welcome to Financial Mastery Simplified, your go-to podcast for making smart money decisions. We break down complex financial topics into easy-to-understand advice you can use every day. Our experts cover everything from budgeting and saving to investing and retirement planning. We give you the tools to take control of your money and build the future you want. With Financial Mastery Simplified, you'll feel informed and empowered to make the best choices for your financial health. Tune in to Financial Mastery Simplified on your favorite podcast platform. Start your journey to financial confidence today.
Visit us at fms.tips and fms.college for more information.
Welcome to House U, where we believe in the power of education. At House U, we're more than just a brand. We're your partner in home ownership, dedicated to educating, equipping, and empowering you every step of the way. Education is at the heart of everything we do. We offer comprehensive resources designed to make home ownership simple and accessible for all. From understanding mortgage options to mastering home maintenance, House U provides the knowledge you need to make informed decisions with confidence. We host workshops and seminars, bringing together experts and community members to share insights and build a stronger, more informed community. Because when you're educated, you're empowered. House U, home ownership made simple for all. Visit our website or contact us today to start your journey with House U. Empower yourself with knowledge and embrace the joy of home ownership.
Thanks for your patience. Now back to our conversation.
You know, if you compare a millionaire now, because the mantra is still be a millionaire, well, then it'd have been like be a 200,000-aire. You know, so my point is, it gets easier and
because of the
easier.
inflation and the value of money, right?
100%.
Yep.
So it gets easier and easier for him to hit his target, his stated targets of I can make you a millionaire, because the system's working for him and it massively grows his business. Now, great. He's a great marketer. He's a fantastic marketer. He's probably one of the best. Sure. Very good at building tribalism, very good at helping certain people, but he also leaves
that's why
out.
You're afraid to post anything, because you know the tribe is going to come at you with the pitchforks.
100%. So I say, okay, so when people get on that, I was like, okay, well, I agree with you. There's good debt and bad debt. But I like to dive into that a little bit and help people understand why, because everybody's heard that. First of all, I think we would all agree consumer debt is terrible. So, but if you have debt that other people pay for, it's beneficial to you. But I like to even go more basic than that. And I say, what is money? Somebody tell me, what is money globally? Just tell me, because I'm super geeky on the monetary system. People are like, well, they equate it to $100 bills in their pocket. They equate it to... I
was going to say something that technically doesn't even exist. I talk all the time about how money is actually a construct of our creation. It's not actually real. So like we're literally letting it stranglehold ourselves. We're getting depressed over it. We're breaking up marriages over it. And the truth is, it doesn't even actually really exist. Like we've created it.
1,000,000%. Money is debt. It's just a number on a digital ledger. And that
Yep.
digital ledger is connected to other digital ledgers that are connected to other digital ledgers. So, I just want to, for the listener that maybe like, because I think you and I get that, but I always try to think, there's this concept in a book that I read called Made to Stick, how to communicate ideas that are made to stick. And it talks about the curse of knowledge. Once you know something, you can't unknow it. So that makes you a
Right.
terrible teacher a lot of times, because you're starting to teach somebody at step 27 and they're back on step 2. And you think you're explaining it crystal clear, but they're like, I'm totally lost. But to you, it's clear
Absolutely.
because you have all this, granular knowledge. So I like to say, okay, well, let's just think about this really. Let's oversimplify it. Let's say somebody's going to buy a house or a car or something, and they go into a bank. Who creates money? Well, most people think it's the government. Now, they do create some money, but that's not where the vast majority of it comes from. It comes from the commercial banking system.
For
So
sure.
somebody wants to buy a car. They go in and let's just keep it simple. They want a $10,000 car. Well, they look at the whole system's based on trust. They say, do we trust you will pay it back with your future earnings? So you
sure.
you just become an asset to them, and it's how reliable is the asset. Well, if
sure.
they decide you're worthy, they just type it into a computer and they create $10,000 in deposits and they put it into your account. Okay, so all balance sheets have to balance. That becomes a liability to them. The deposit credit they just put in your account is a liability to them, and the offsetting asset is the loan. Everything balances. So they just create the money. Okay. And you can get into fractional reserve banking and all this. And even that's wildly misunderstood if you look at history. But my point is, it's just, instead of saying, another way to think about it would be, instead of saying, how much money do you have? Just be like, what's your score? What's your digital score on the scoreboard? It's just numbers on a digital ledger that don't exist. I mean, it's a very, very small fraction of the money that exists in paper bills. And even that is credit. The money has changed many, many times. And so I want to talk mostly American history since the 1700s. There's been major resets along the way, but we think like, what we're in today will always be because it'll always be. Well, no, history says that's not true. History has said, there's people alive today that have witnessed those major changes. We've witnessed those major changes.
I was going to say, it's why I love when everybody thinks that, the government's going to come save you, or they'll be like, well, the way that this operates, it's always been that way. So it's always going to be that way. And I'm like, no, not necessarily. Look, everything is a gamble, right? Literally everything. So when people are like, oh, well, the stock market, that's a good place to put my money. Well, maybe. I'm not saying that you shouldn't put your money there or that you can't grow it there. You can, but you can grow it a number of places. And every single one of them is 100% a gamble. There is there's truly nothing in this life that is certain but death and taxes, right? Like literally nothing.
Yeah. And
so when people are arguing
has
with me,
risk.
well,
I would say,
and I'm like, you should, when it comes to financial freedom, you need to be looking out for yourself, because the truth is that none of these systems are played to make you the winner.
That's
They're
true.
not.
And, that's really what led to the Code 3 American mission, is I started stepping back, looking at the macro view. And, just to kind of summarize it, without, I got to be careful about getting too far into the weeds and leaving people, jumping off at step 27. But, I look at, okay, everybody talks about $36 trillion in debt. Okay, I can make an argument it matters. I can make an argument it doesn't matter. But that isn't what worries me. What worries me is, to a degree, then a debt to GDP worries to me a little bit. But I look at the forward trajectory and I say, okay, what nobody's talking about, and it's because they don't want you to really focus on it, is the unfunded liabilities. Okay, so that number is debatable, anywhere from 50 to $110 trillion. I usually go with the number 90, just based on a lot of stuff I've read. But regardless, whether it's 50 or 90 or 100, it's inconceivable. It's inconceivable in size. So that's going to be on top of the 36 trillion. So eventually you have to say, okay, well, what's that going to do to debt to GDP? Well, it's going to become unsustainable. So what are the answers? And I post about this on social media all the time, because if people can get this, nobody knows exactly what to do. You just got to recognize trends. So if you're at 30,000 feet looking at the trend, you have to say the trend has to be inflationary. Okay. Because you say, okay, well, what are the three options? Well, how are they going to, they don't have the money. So there's not enough tax revenue to pay all these obligations. And when I say unfunded liability, sometimes people ask me what that is. That's promises made that are not currently funded for Medicare, Social Security, veterans benefits, all those types of things, right? Well, there's really only a few major buckets in government spending, and they can't really cut them. We're not going to cut defense spending. You know, we're in this global posturing situation with major countries right now that we haven't been in decades. You know, social spending is politically unfavorable to cut. You know, you
Right.
get the interest rate on the debt. So really what it boils down to is I got a few options if you just understand the mechanics. And to simplify it, it's they can dramatically raise revenue. There's only two ways to do it. They have to significantly raise taxes, not politically
Right.
survivable. So they're not going to do that.
No. Yeah.
Politicians will be voted out and they care
I was going to
about
say,
winning.
no politician will survive raising taxes by extreme amounts.
No, like doubling the tax rate. It's not going to happen. Or they can massively grow GDP. Well, that's not just that easy. So then you would increase your tax base. Well, the other option would be, well, they can default on the promise made and just say, well, we're not going to pay it. People will riot. If you've been paying into Social Security your whole life and all this, and all of a sudden they just pull the plug and say, I'm not going to pay you, it'd be much like loaning money to your neighbor to buy a car. And then he just one day walks over and says, I'm not paying you back. I mean, there's going to be like a snowball fight in the front yard, right? So that's not going to be politically survivable. So then you say, okay, understanding that all politicians, all these policymakers, and I don't really like saying politician because it sounds like I'm being political and I'm very agnostic. Policymakers, they just fact of the matter, they work on short election windows, 2, 4, 6 years. They don't have time for things to work themselves out, for father time to take a vote. They need quote
Yeah, I was going to
unquote.
say, it cracks me up when everybody says that one politician did this or that or whatever, and the time window they have is so small, especially if you understand how laws are made and created, and I mean, the amount of time it takes to change things, it's so impossible, right? I mean, usually we're seeing the changes that somebody made ripple like 10, 15 years into the future. Like that's what we're seeing.
Yeah, and they can't if a solution takes time. I equate it like a shoulder surgery. Hey doc, my shoulder hurts real bad. Well, that's going to be terrible and it's going to continue to hurt. Or we can do this surgery and you'll feel better in 6 months, but it's going to hurt like heck for a while. Okay,
Right.
well, we need it to hurt like heck for a while. The pain becomes the cure. Well, politicians don't have time for the pain to become the cure because the pain will become unpalatable, politically, and they'll lose. So the third option they have, and I always base on, nobody knows what will happen, but I just look at probabilities based on human incentive, and the incentive there is winning votes. And I say, okay, well, the third option is they can make good on the nominal promise. In other words, if they owe you, make a number up, $1,000 a month in pick anything, social payment, right? They can pay that, but they will fix that payment nominally, and they will erode away the real benefit over time. It's called inflation. Well, that's how they get the debt to GDP back down. Okay. And we
That's why
equate.
Social Security ages keep rising. Like I've been
Right.
asked a million times in the financial space, well, do you think that, we're going to still get Social Security? I said, oh yeah, they're not going to take it away. But what's going to happen is whereas you used to get it, 62 and whatever the heck, or 65, now it's going to be, you don't get it until 67.5. You don't get it till 70. You don't get it till 72. You see what I mean? It's just that they're just going to keep moving the goalpost. So you'll still get it, but most people might be dead before it gets issued.
Yeah, exactly. And that's eroding away the net benefit,
Correct.
Or the real benefit, excuse me. So it works very much like, so some people get confused, and we have a video. I put together like a 12 or 13 minute video, something like that, with some nice illustrations, and it takes a very simple example, like $100, and it explains the mechanics of inflation, and it walks all the way through why this happens, and it talks about debt to GDP in a very simple way to understand. In the example in there, you'll see like people will think, oh, GDP is growing, and it's entertaining, I guess, for lack of better words, to listen to politicians talk about debt to GDP is growing. Okay, like real growth or just, nominal growth? Because wealth is not money. That's the biggest mistake we've been conditioned to believe. Wealth is not money. And, I believe there's a four-legged stool that really is wealth in life. That's relationship capital, time capital, financial capital, and health capital. But just to focus on the financial piece, wealth isn't money. Wealth for all of human history is access to goods and services. Okay. Money, like we talked about earlier, is it's an arbitrary number on a digital scorecard somewhere. And it's created out of thin air every single day. So wealth is created with new loans and it's destroyed by paying off those loans. But it always has to grow by at least the interest rate. See? So if I give you a loan for $10, but you got to pay me back 12 in exactly a year. The money supply has to grow by 2, or
Right.
you can't pay me back, right? The system won't work. So it's naturally inflationary mechanically. And so what happens is GDP can grow nominally. And the example I use in the video is I use farmland. And I'm like, okay, well, here's, I don't remember what I said, here's however many acres of farmland. Let's pretend our entire economy is, 10 acres of farmland, 10 John Deere tractors, or maybe 100 acres of farmland, 10 John Deere tractors, and however many bushels of corn. And then I show the math. Let's say each tractor costs this. Let's say the corn, this many bushels per acre. Here's the price. And okay, but in reality, the wealth to the people is the land, the corn, and the tractors. It has nothing to do with the money that exchanges those things. So then it's like, okay, well, let's say, debt's 125% of, debt's 125% of GDP. I'll show, well, here's another example. Next year, let's just say the price of the tractors inflate 2%. The corn goes up 2%. Well, at the end of the day, we produce more in GDP nominally, but we still have the same amount of land, the same amount of tractors, and the same amount of corn. We didn't get any wealthier as a people. And so that's what's happening. The GDP is growing nominally, but the access to goods and services is shrinking, which means people's quality of life is going down. Elon Musk is a poor man. He's the poorest man on earth if he's stuck on a deserted island with no water and food.
Right.
Doesn't matter what's on his scorecard because he has
For
no
sure.
goods and services. What's happening is when you said the middle class is eroding, you talked about the gap between the haves and the have-nots. That's the middle class eroding. Some are going to the haves and some are going to the have-nots. That gap is certainly widening. This is what's happening. The middle class really is having less access to goods and services for more exchange of effort. So they're becoming more time poor. They're having to work harder, get second jobs, whatever the case may be. And the net result is less access to real goods and services. So they're putting in more time capital and getting less net benefit out. And that's why people are becoming upset. The mechanics of the system, it's not like this team red, team blue, Republicans, Democrats. It's not that. It's the mechanics of the system have been put in place for decades. And I could really go into that. I could go into something that really inflated Wall Street, but it starts in the early 80s. But the reality is the system has changed along the ways along the way, and it changed massively in 2008, and it changed massively again in COVID. And
For sure.
but that trend had already been there. It was like the fire was lit for decades. They just dumped some gasoline on it sometimes.
For sure.
That's why
and
people are
I think
stressed.
that I was going to say, I think that the truth is this is why it is so important to educate yourself when it comes to the financial aspects of financial space, because here's the real truth, right? A lot of the systems, they are necessarily, they are broken to a sense. There are some aspects to the math that, like you said, or whatever, it's like the concept of Social Security. Yes, I believe that it'll exist forever. However, do I believe that you'll be getting it as early as what your parents got it at, or your grandparents, and so on and so on? No, I don't. I believe that they're going to get it to continue to push out. Well, this is why it's more important than ever for you not to rely on others, but for you to look inward and for you to understand, what does financial freedom look like for me, right? Like, what does true wealth and sustainability look like for me? Because the truth is life is gonna life. You can't control the system that you're placed within, right? So we can't control the way that the government has set up some of these programs. Yes, you can get politically involved if that's what you want to do, right? And try to facilitate change that way if you so want to. That's not necessarily my bent or what I like to do, mainly because I'm very well aware that the only person I really can control is me. I can only really control myself and my actions. So how do I do that, right? How do I do that in a system that maybe isn't as good as I would like it to be, right? So I do that by knowing my truth, knowing myself, knowing what aligns with me, right? Doing the understanding. I talk all the time on the podcast about being intentionality. And yes, your intention is going to shift and change as you go through seasons of life, as you look at different aspects of your life. All of these things are true. But what you need to make sure that you're doing is that whatever decisions you're making, they're yours, because this is something that I found that happens a lot. So especially right now with a lot of the levels of control, especially what we saw during COVID, where we had a lot of governmental control over what was happening in our lives, right? And that is not necessarily a political statement about one side or the other. It's just the truth. We basically all gave the government the right to basically lock us in our homes. This created all kinds of challenges, not just financial, but mental health challenges, right? I know that I personally was flipping my lid a little bit about being locked into my home, not necessarily because I was anti-saving people, but because I had actually lived with a spouse that was very verbally and physically abusive prior to COVID. Like that was my first husband. And all I could think about is the women or the men that were trapped in their homes with these abusers, so to speak, right? Like what that looked like for them and how that changed. So you can only control what you can control, which is yourself, your actions, how you are going to look at your own money, how are you going to fund your future, and looking at it through the lens of the fact that not every system is built exactly the way that you think. That's why you have to kind of dig deep and see, right? You and I were talking earlier about how it is a misnomer that the stock market has made, a lot of money. If you actually really look at who makes the most money in the stock market, it is typically the people with the most money. Why is that? Because it's a lot of reasons, but like they can hold on longer, right? So they could ride out. Whereas a lot of people that have less money have less ability to do that, right? It's because the way that, they have more understanding and knowledge of what's coming, the relationships they hold. I mean, there's a lot of things that are going into all of that. And so I'm not anti any way you want to make money, right? Be it you want to start a business, you want to work for a corporation for the rest of your life, like whatever it looks like, it doesn't matter to me. My biggest thing is that whatever the decision is, you should do it with knowledge and you should do it with intention. And then thirdly, the alignment of whether that makes sense. And I get it. Not every single moment in your life is everything you're doing going to be aligned with you, right? Sometimes we do things just simply to be able to put food on our table and whatever. There's those periods of time that we have that, but we still need to be working towards an ultimate goal of whatever that freedom looks like for you. And having an understanding of exactly what Jay's been talking about. How does money work? How does inflation work? How is it affecting me, right? But also, because this has been a little bit of a heavy conversation, not always believing in so much doom and gloom, because the truth is that you can only affect what you can affect. So if you sit in the heaviness of like, oh my gosh, the sky is falling or whatever, we live in a period of existence where money to be made is more easily done now than it ever has been. I mean, ever. You go back and look at your grandparents, like if they had the choice to sit on their cell phones, which did not exist, and put on some social media stuff and make money. Like that was not a thing, right? And so like we have more ability, we have more options, we have more true ability to hold freedom. But if you're not actively seeking it, then that wealth divide is just going to continue to grow and you are going to be left behind, unfortunately, in my personal opinion.
Yeah, 100%. We're living in just the best time of human history, really. I mean, we're so far we're really blessed. So I'm really not a doom and gloom guy, but I'm also like a matter of fact guy. And
Oh,
I
agree.
like what you said that, you can only control you. But it's really hard. It's like being in a forest. I grew up around mountains. It's like being in the mountains without a compass. And you can't see out. You can't get any faraway visual landmarks. It's foggy. You just start walking. All you're doing is walking. You don't know if you're going up, down, sideways, right way, wrong way. And that's the point of becoming informed. But once you become informed and you see it for what it is, you can make very advantageous moves. The reason the wealth
Absolutely.
divide is benefiting the wealthy so much is because they understand the system and they do think it's like jumping in a river. Most people are trying to swim up the river. They just put on a life jacket and float down it.
Exactly.
That's really what's happening. So, but you were talking about controlling what we can control. So I don't like to leave people with doom and gloom of here's the problem. Just, okay, well, matter of fact, here's the system. It's the way it is. We're not going to change that. So what can I do? Well, I like to start with why. Simon Sinek, start with why when you're communicating an idea. And to me, we were talking before we started recording, that what I learned in tactics, okay, in the SWAT world, was when, let's just pretend you have a bad guy in a house and he's the worst guy ever, right? He's got to go to jail. How do we deal with that? He's shooting at everybody, whatever. Well, first of all, we show up and we put ourselves in position of safety first. That's why it'd be like not having a bunch of consumer debt, having a savings account with some reserves, things like that. We do that with armored vehicles and things, but we show up. First thing we do is set containment. We keep that problem from moving all over the place. That's kind of like wandering around in the woods, not knowing which way to go. We can't control anything. We can't make sense out of any chaos if we can't just get the movement to stop. So we set
Absolutely.
containment. So the first thing we do, it's always the 3 C's. First C is containment. Contain, communicate, change their environment. Then we tell them what we want them to do. And if they don't, we change their environment. A lot of times we'll introduce gas or something, and now it's not as pleasant to breathe in there, so they come outside to fresh air. We control that environment. Well, what I would caution people about doing is relying only on 401ks that few people control inside of Wall Street. So it's being at the bottom of a giant funnel. I call it a fatal funnel. And the reason I call it that is in our world, we have to navigate. In the SWAT world, we have to go through hallways and doorways sometimes, but we don't linger there. We don't hang out there and see what's going to happen because one person can control all. It's a traditional ambush. You just don't, right? You always go into a position that you can maneuver. So we're always trying to stay out of fatal funnels where few people control a lot. And that's just a principle. You don't violate principles. And if you do, you do something to mitigate the risk. Well, my point is you get containment. A lot of people are contained in jobs, 401ks. They really can't move around. Well, what's really happening in a 401k? The people that are selling you those products are turning that into cash flow today, making their life better today, and they're telling you to stick it out for 30 years and take all the gamble, right? And then they're not telling you about inflation and all this stuff. So they contain you in the system. Then they did it in COVID. They can tell you what they want you to do. And if you don't comply, they remove government funding. That happened to hospitals. If you don't do certain things, we're going to pull government funding. And all these employees are like, oh my gosh, where else am I going to go work? No matter what hospital I go to, it's the same thing. So my point is, try to avoid the containment. If you don't have containment, the other two pieces can't even come together. It's impossible. So what can you do? To me, it's obvious. I don't believe the goal should be to make money. That is just a stepping stone along the journey because it's just something we transact in. But I want to turn it from, I want to acquire things that are real and necessary. So I want to acquire things like housing. I want to acquire things like farmland, oil, energy, food, necessary services, necessary businesses, because those are always going to be required and they benefit by inflationary pressures. It's like floating down the river with the life jacket. I want to control those real and necessary things because if I do, I'm not contained solely in any of those systems. Think about it. I like to use this analogy. Think about if everybody worked at Walmart, which a lot of people do. Nothing wrong with that. What's easier, to influence whatever that number is, 10 million people to all go the same direction at the same time and get them to do what you want them to do if you're a policymaker? No, I mean, you can't put 3 people in a car and say, where do you go for supper? Nobody can decide, right? So you're not going to get all those people to do something. But you could go to a boardroom to the CEOs of Walmart and you can get 5 people to see the world your way. And those 5 people can turn the dial and get the 10 million to change behavior, right? So my point is, I don't care if you make the money at Walmart or whatever. I just wouldn't be dumping it all into those funnels of control. I would be dumping it into things that are real. Okay. So for example, a house, let's just take a simple house. You're in the mortgage business.
I am.
What is a house when you buy a house? It's a utilitarian function, right? It shelters people, it bathes people, it feeds people, it creates some privacy. But let's say the house is 4 bedroom, 2 bathroom, whatever, 2,000 square feet or something. And let's say it's $300,000 today. Well, the narrative is, and this is the mechanics, right? The narrative is, well, the house became more valuable 10 years from now. No, it didn't. Not unless you remodel it or made it bigger or something. It's still the same size lot, sleeps 4 people, bathes 2 people, feeds the same amount of folks. What happened is it just became more expensive in dollars. The dollars became less valuable. Now it's true. So most appreciation is actually inflation. Correct. Now, you can have appreciation above that based on you get in a high growth area and supply demand.
Well, yeah, I was going to say market conditions, supply and demand and things like that. But yes, as a general rule, you're right. A lot of the appreciation is coming from inflation.
Right.
That's correct.
So what I look at is like, why would I go trade futures to buy lumber or oil or whatever in these funnels when I could just go acquire lumber and oil and plastic and labor and land and gravel and gypsum and cement, all these commodities? That's what a house is. It's a basket of commodities that have been assembled into a useful purpose. And the reason it inflates in values is because commodities inflate. The people harvesting those commodities, their wages inflate over years, and that dumps into the price of homes. So all I'm saying is I think people, the way you get out of the funnel of control is first of all, just get educated, listen to shows like this, understand what you can control, learn about it. And it doesn't take a lot. I mean, like $100 worth of books would change your life.
Oh,
And
for
then
sure.
just work. So I had a mentor one time and I was like, hey, this is all what I've done in business. And he says, well, here's your problem. You're going from cash, you're building a house, you're going from cash to an asset, and then you're selling it for cash. You're getting the crap taxed out of you. You're giving away a third of it. Cash to asset to cash. He goes, no. Go from cash to asset to cash flow. And now the tax benefits will favor you. You get to keep all that money because the government
Most
needs
people do
housing.
not realize that the vast majority of the reason that the wealthy succeed is because they actually pay almost the least amount of the tax base. And that's because they understand the tax laws. And let me just tell you, from going to law school, I took an actual class on tax, and that book is ridiculous. I had to own it. And I had to take it to class, and it was like this freaking thick. It was ridiculous. And the amount of weird, crazy laws, loopholes, all of the things. But if you don't know how to take advantage of them, then guess what? Like, you're not going to, and you're going to just be like paying out the yin yang. Like, you know what I mean? Like, this is where I guess I get so frustrated with people, is that like, you have all of this in your control. It's just that people don't necessarily want to make the effort to figure it out. And I get it. It does take time, and it's not always the most interesting. Ask me how I know. I had to sit in that class and learn about taxes. And it was really, really boring. But the truth is that you're right. You do have the control to be able to do some of these exact things like you're saying.
Right. And if people really want to get their head around that, just go read Robert Kiyosaki's book, Cash Flow Quadrant. It'll tell you exactly how the 4 ways money's earned, how it's taxed. I've had the benefit of hanging around Tom Wheelwright a few times, which is Rich Dad Advisor on tax. And Tom says it best all the time. He's like, that the wealthy are not favored with tax. He says we live in a society where everybody has to have equal application of the law. So he always says, if you want to change your tax, change your facts. What Walmart gets is a benefit. What Elon Musk gets is a benefit. The guy on Main Street gets too, the guy or gal on Main Street, because you just have to do what they do.
That's correct.
You just have to behave like they behave. You have to structure your entities. You need a team. You just go out and hire people.
I was going to say, people just haven't made that realization, and they haven't made the realization that it is within their control if they will change the narrative, change who they're hanging out with, change what they're looking at, right? Like, they have this in their power. And this conversation has been amazing, and we definitely got way into all the depth that is so helpful to help people really understand the structure and the form. And if you guys are interested, I know that Jay, I think, has something to offer. I know he does some really great different kinds of things. So he's going to tell you a little bit about that, and then we'll kind of wrap up the show. But thank you, Jay, so much for being on. We definitely will have to have you on again. We'll have to talk more, because there's so many different things in the financial space. We could just go down all the rabbit holes, and I'm sure you and I could be here for about 20 years talking about money. Although I don't necessarily know if everybody would want to hear that, but so tell us a little bit about what they can sign up for so they can kind of learn more on, with you.
Yeah, you bet. So we create various forms of content, and it's inside the Code 3 American community. If you want to be on that, you can get our mission briefs. That's what we call our newsletters. They're Code 3 American mission briefs. And it's just a community for like-minded people to come together that's saying, hey, the system is what it is. How can we benefit from that? How can we collaborate and share ideas and get unstuck faster as we go out into the world and try things? And so pretty soon we're going to release what we call the Code 3 American Team Room. And just like in SWAT, everybody, every SWAT team has a team room, and it's a level of camaraderie, like-minded people coming together to accomplish a mission, support each other, things like that. It's full of free content. While we're recording a little bit of content waiting to go in there, but in the meantime, you can get on our mission brief newsletter list. I share my thoughts, whatever projects we're working on. A lot of times I'll just talk about stuff that I see in the news, and I'll unpack that a little differently. But you'll also get a number of free videos, like the inflation video. We have a report in there that the real returns of the S&P 500 for 25 years. We wrote that last fall. It's not 8%. It's between 2.2 and 2.9. And we'll show the math on that. So we come with receipts. We talk about the history of 401ks and the pipeline of money to Wall Street, just from a historical perspective, not opinion, just the facts. And so there's all that type of stuff in there. And if you want to get that, it's all 100% free. We never charge for it. And we're just held. Our mission is enriching humanity and saving America through financial independence. Excuse me, need another drink of water. But to get that, just send an email, American at code3assets.com. That's the number 3. So American at code3assets.com. We'll send you that stuff over, and you'll certainly get notified when the team room's unlocked, which is also free.
I love that. Well, thank you so much again. And for those of you who do not know, myself and my company, we also offer a free resource that is called Key Steps. It's like something that helps you kind of understand where you're at, either in a home buying journey or just really financially speaking from like the credit perspective, income perspective, just so you can kind of have an understanding. You'd be surprised at how many people don't really know where they stand with all this. Well, guess what? You can't leverage what's out there and what's available to you if you're not actively seeking out and understanding where you're at the present moment. So definitely, we always will include that link in the show notes as well. So feel free to access that as well. Again, thank you, Jay, so much for your time. And hopefully this episode of Financial Mastery Simplified was helpful for you. And we'll see you again next week on another episode of Financial Mastery Simplified.
Thanks so much.